Hey guys. You are watching your anime world. How are you all? Please support to subscribe this channel for watching new interesting stories. So in this video, we will see what if Deku mastered the Beast Fist to reclaim his power. Here is short summary. When Izuku was younger, he was trained in the fighting style of Geki Juken, but his dojo was shut down. Now, watch as he reclaims that power for himself and roars to the heavens. But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible, share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. Inside the building, the air was charged with the energy of their movements. Gran Torino, a seasoned hero with a shock of white hair and a perpetual twinkle in his eye, known for his lightning-fast speed, and Izuku Midoriya, a young hero in training with a determined look in his green eyes, who could amplify his physical strength with his quirk, were a blur, zipping back and forth at an exhilarating pace. "That's good," Gran Torino acknowledged, his body moving through the air as Izuku leapt over his kick. "But not that good," he corrected, his kick unleashing a gust of air and a resounding impact as it met Izuku's face. His voice carried a hint of guidance, a mentor's touch, reassuring Izuku of his potential. "You're getting there, kid. Just remember, it's not just about the power, it's about how you use it." The teen, his breath stolen by the force of the blow, rolled across the floor and collided with a wall, the impact echoing through the room. Gran Torino glanced at the winded Izuku, then shook his head. "All right, go grab some food. And if you come across any crooks or villains out there, you have my permission to fight them if there's no other hero around," he said, looking at the confused Izuku. "What do you mean?" Izuku asked him as Gran Torino raised a brow. "Has your homeroom teacher informed you about that law or any other heroes at UA?" he inquired, his student shaking his head. "Well then, here's the law. You must possess a hero license to be able to go out and save people, or you must have the permission of a pro hero, like myself, to use your quirk to be a hero," Gran Torino explained, the gravity of the hero's responsibilities sinking in for Izuku. "Right," Izuku said as he got changed out of his civilian clothes, which were a pair of dark green cargo pants and a white shirt with the kanji for t-shirt, and walked to the door, put on his shoes and walked off. Izuku walked down the street where he knew a konbini was as the training went through his head before ideas popped into his head. And some of those he shooed away from him. "I no longer have the right to use that," Izuku thought as a picture in his mind showed him a cage. But it had small cracks in the metal around the cage. Once Izuku found the konbini, he walked in and waved to the teen behind the counter. "So Torino, kick your ass again?" he asked Izuku. He had short brown hair and tank skin. He wore a white shirt with the konbini symbol on his left beep. Yeah, and he told me that I can use my quirk to fight a villain if one appears around here," he told him, and the teen nodded. "Fair, and anyway, we both know you can use that," he said before Izuku sighed. "I haven't used that in 3 years," Izuku told him as he picked up some drinks and other snacks. "Izuku, we were both at the same school, and let me tell you, a beast does not stay locked away for long," he said as Izuku looked at him. "I tried to keep the snake locked up once that bastard shut down the dojo, but I heard that Master Okami has managed to gather some money to remake the dojo," he said as Izuku subconsciously formed a smile, but it soon died. "I lost the right to use," Izuku said before a small girl burst into the shop. She possessed bluish, off-white hair that fell in disarray and extended nearly to her waist, with a middle part that framed her forehead. Her eyes were expansive and imparted an air of innocence, yet they gleamed a bright red. A small, brown horn emerged from the right side of her forehead. Draped in a simple, short-sleeved dress of a dingy, pale tan hue, she bore bandages encompassing her arms and legs, culminating at her wrists and ankles. Izuku and the cashier looked at each other, and Izuku walked over to her. "Hey, are you okay?" Izuku asked her gently. She turned to him, and Izuku saw the look in her eyes. They showed one thing: fear. She shook her head. "The bad man is after me," she told him as Izuku looked over to the cashier, who looked out the window and saw someone heading their way. It was a pale young man of a narrow build with short, shaggy, auburn hair parted to the right. His eyes are thin, his irises small and gold, and he has relatively long lower eyelashes and small eyebrows. He has 3 piercings in his left ear, and a plague doctor mask covers his mouth. He wore a black dress shirt with matching dress pants, a pale gray tie around his neck, and a belt with a long, thin buckle around his waist. Over this, he wore a dark olive green bomber jacket with a thick purple fur collar and white lace-up sneakers with tan soles. He did not wear socks. The man looked around before he spotted the konbini and approached it. The cashier moved his body. It gave off a silver, black aura, and his body moved in a snake-like way as he moved silently behind the counter and hid as Izuku did the same. "Eri, I know you're here, so why don't you come out so we can get back to making them bullets?" the man said as he walked into the store. Izuku looked down at the shaking girl he had put next to him. As she was about to go to him, Izuku held her and shook his head. "Come now, Eri," he said as Izuku saw that he had white rubber gloves on his hands and started to take them off. "Now, where are you?" he said as he looked around the shop. A silverfish black aura caught Izuku's eye as he saw the cashier moving their way. Izuku nodded, helped him and Eri from the aisle, and stood up. Both he and the man locked eyes. "So I can take it you heard everything?" he asked Izuku, who said nothing but looked at the man as arcs of green lighting formed around him. "Now, kid, tell me where Eri is so I can return to my work," he said as he picked up a bag of chips and turned it into something that resembled dirt. Izuku said nothing but kept his stance up. "He needs 5-point contact, and then he can what?" Izuku asked as he got ready to attack before he did something that shocked him. The man took hold of the shelves that the items were on, and it turned into a long spike aimed at him. But Izuku moved out of the way. "So you can control matter with 5-point contact," Izuku said as the man looked at Izuku. "That's right, and now that you know I can't have you blabbing," he said with a wave of his hand as he locked eyes with Izuku. A growl echoed in Izuku's head as the green-haired boy stood and looked at the man. "I ain't letting you, though," Izuku said to him. "So be it then," the man said as he ran at Izuku with his hand out, but Izuku ducked under the hand and went for a punch. The man moved his hand down to grab Izuku's outstretched arm, but Izuku raised a leg to kick the man away. "You sicken me," the man told Izuku, who was returning to his fighting stance. "And why is it that?" Izuku asked him as he got ready to move in. "Is it because I'm helping a little girl away from someone who wants to hurt her?" he asked the man. "No, because you and the rest of this society love quirks and think that they should be accepted when everyone but the few without a quirk is sick," he said as he put his hands on both aisles and then turned them into spikes that shot forward into Izuku. The growl that Izuku heard in his head turned into a full-on roar as the cage in his mind gained more cracks, and they were big enough for an eye to look out of one of the cracks. It looked like a lion's eye. Izuku kept moving around all the spikes sent his way from the man he was fighting. "I'm not getting anywhere with this," the man thought as he looked at Izuku, who was thinking the same as he had been when he looked at his head and heard the roar again. He can change matter but energy, Izuku thought as his body moved into a fighting stance he had not formed in a long time. His body stood straight, his left hand forming a clawed hand over his right shoulder, and his right hand was a fist at the ready. More cracks were forming in the cage as it started to rattle and shake. "Then I need to see if I am worthy of using that style once more," he thought as a gold aura formed around his hands. So Izuku ran forward, with his opponent holding his hand out. "Everyone makes a miss," he thought before Izuku landed a punch square in the man's face, knocking him down. But the man took hold of Izuku's leg and used his quirk on Izuku. But nothing happened. "What the?" he asked as he looked at Izuku's leg and saw the golden aura around both legs. "You can only destroy and control matter, but if there is energy around the matter, that will stop your quirk," Izuku said as he let his leg out of the man's grip. The cage in Izuku's mind was slowly disintegrating and falling to bits, showing a lion with golden fur. "One for all full cowl 5% Okayan," Azumu called out in his head as he gathered his quirk's strength and the power of the lion within his soul and punched the man once more. And this time, it was square in the chest, and he punched the man out the window. But he was not done, as Izuku jumped after the man. Eri watched in amazement as Izuku beat the man after her. "Wow, Kais," she said but could not find the words. From around her, the shadow Kai had formed around her started to be pulled away from her and into the jaws of a lion. "You puny little fool, do you know everything that I can do with her?" Kai yelled at Izuku, who landed on the ground in a stance reminiscent of a cat. I can free the world of the sickness of quirks, stop the idealizing of heroes, and bring the world back to the way it should be. He yelled at Izuku, who moved out of the way of the attacks that were sent his way. People in the street stopped, looked at the two, and were shocked to hear what Kai had said about them all. A news crew with a cameraman was recording the whole fight. I don't care about that, but when there is a child who a person like you hurts, I will always make sure that the child is safe, Izuku said as he pulled his fist back as the aura around him moved to his fist and formed a lion head around his fist. Juoken, Izuku called out as he punched the air, and the lion head shot forward in an energy beam that hit Kai in the chest and started to push his back until he could not move any there back. Back at Gran Torino's apartment, Gran Torino was watching his TV when the news showed Izuku and Kai fighting. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It seems that we are watching a fight between a hero student and a villain, it looks like, and from what we have heard the villain wants to rid the world of quirks. The news reporter said as Gran Torino pulled out his phone and called his contact in the Koshu police and told them that Izuku had his permission to use his quirk, and once he was off the line and was ready to go and help his student. The newswoman said something shocking. But what is the quirk of the hero student and what is his new power he is using? She asked as another woman walked into frame of the camera. I can answer the second question if you like, she said as the newswoman turned to see a woman in her early 30s with short silver hair and gray eyes walk over. That would be most helpful, the newswoman said as she held out her mic. He is using a fighting style called Geki Juken, and it revolves around the use of ki, and everyone can use it, she said as she held up a hand and showed everyone who was watching a purple aura around it. And he is a user of the Shishi-ken form of Geki Juken, she said as she returned to Izuku. So Gran Torino turned off his TV, jumped out his door, and used his quirk to shoot through the air to find his student. And he found them along with a crowd of people that the police were keeping away from the fight. And then he found the news reporter and the woman with the silver hair. Izuku looked onward at his target as he held out his arms. The gold and green aura formed around them. He pointed his thumbs out and pointed up his index and middle fingers. Geki Vaza Oo Dan, Izuku called out as he shot out his aura, which took the form of a lion running at Kai and started to attack him. That is a Geki Dan, where the user will shoot out their animal spirit to aid them in their fight against their enemy while you gather yourself, either for your next move or your final move, the woman with silver hair said as a smile formed. And I believe that this is going to be the final move, she said as everyone looked at Izuku, who got down onto all fours as the lion ran back around and merged with Izuku. People looked at Izuku and saw that around Izuku was a slightly transparent lion made of a gold aura. And what shocked them the most was that Izuku started to move on all fours. Kai looked at Izuku as he moved closer but did not see a human running at him. He saw an actual lion heading his way with jaws ready to bite down on him and crush him. Shishi-ken Higi. Gakido Juo, Izuku called out as he delivered a punch to Kai. The punch took the man off his feet and sent him into a wall. As Kai fell forward, another blast hit him in the same spot where Izuku hit him, sending him back into the wall and knocking him out. When his opponent fell to the floor with a thud, Izuku let out a shout that did not sound human, as the shout sounded like a lion's roar. Well done, kid, a policeman said as he walked over and put quirk suppression cuffs on Kai and the man was dragged away. Another officer approached him and said, well done, Izuku Midoriya, for what you have done today, and Gran Torino told us what he told you, and well done on taking down this villain. He told Izuku, who looked around him in shock at the people cheering at him. Indeed, you did good work, cub, a voice Izuku had not heard in a long time said as he turned to the woman with silver hair and bowed to her, one hand sitting horizontally on a fist. Master Okami, thank you, but I lost my way in the art of Juken, Izuku said as he closed his eyes and did not come up from his bow. Master Okami let out a sigh before chopping at his head. That is for losing Yue and giving in to the hate that was thrown at you, she told him before placing a kind hand on his head, and I am proud to say that you have found your way back, young cub, she said as she ruffled his hair. So, kid, how was the first real fight of your career? Gran Torino asked as he walked up to Izuku, who looked confused. They filmed you, and you will have to give them your hero name for the Hero Commission to recognize you as a hero in waiting. They may offer you a chance to take the Pro Hero exam early along with your call, he said as Izuku looked around in amazement as he looked at the camera crew before getting an idea. Gran Torino, when you were at UA, Did anyone change their hero name when they were out on the internship before? Izuku asked him as he looked at Izuku and nodded. Yes, there was a few, and they are currently some of the high rankers, Gran Torino said as he watched Izuku walk up to the camera crew, looking confused. Musutafu, UA High School, Teachers Lounge. All the UA High School teachers watched the news that Izuku had beaten a villain on his third day of the internship. And here he comes now, the newswoman said as Izuku approached the camera. And young man, can you tell me why you did this? She asked Izuku. Well, you see, that man who I had fought was harming a young girl, and from when the man's plan was, he wanted to rid the world of all quirks, he said as the woman asked him questions. Is that even possible? President Mike asked his boss. It is as if the girl possessed a quirk that could erase, stop, and nullify quirks, but I want to know how he would do this, Nezu said as he took a sip of his tea while he watched the TV, but he did not learn how. The newswoman asked him about his quirk and the fighting style he used. Still, when the police wanted to talk with Izuku, the woman asked one final question. Can you tell me and the people at home why you did this? You could have walked away and continued your training, she asked him, as the teachers were thinking the same thing. So you are saying that I should just leave a child to be captured again by a man who wanted to hurt her over and over? He asked as the woman looked shocked. A hero does not turn their back on someone in need, and no matter what they do they have to make sure that the people come first over the villain. And yes, if I could have ran out the door with her, but with this man's quirk only someone who could nullify his quirk or has an energy-based quirk could stop him, and thanks to me using ki I could, Izuku said as the woman nodded at him as she smiled. I see, and sorry for making it sound like that, but truly one last question, she said as she got ready to end. Yes, Izuku asked her. Here it comes, Midnight said as she got ready to find out her opinion of Izuku. What is your hero codename? The news reporter asked him, and Izuku smiled at her. And his words shocked the heroes in the room. I'm the Juken hero. Shishikyu, Izuku said with a smile before the police pulled him away. As the news reporter wrapped up the story, the teachers looked at each other. When did he change his codename? Cementos asked as Midnight took apart Izuku's codename. Well, as we know, Juken is his fighting style, so that part makes sense, she said as the others looked at her. And that woman said that he is a user of the Lion Fist, so she is for his lion spirit. Why the Q? She asked herself. All Might looked on in thought as he put this together. So that is what you are doing, young Midoriya, telling the world that you are the ninth in line without telling them directly, he thought as he gained a smile. I know, he said as Midnight turned to him. Why? She asked him. Young Midoriya is the ninth in line of a long line of successors, while I know the eighth. There was Nimbus, Smoke Eater, and Lariat, who came before them, All Might said as Midnight's eyes shot wide. So he's the ninth in line of this succession, and so he chose the word 9 to finish off his hero name, so Lion 9, not the best name, but it is something that can fill out what he needs, Midnight said with a smile. Late at night, Koshu, Gran Torino's apartment. Izuku and Gran Torino were back after talking with the police, and Eri was sleeping on Gran Torino's couch. Are you sure it's a good idea to adopt her? Torino asked him as Izuku looked over at him. The last time a person with One for All had a child to look after, they did not make it, he told Izuku. Izuku looked down at him before moving his eyes to Eri's sleeping form. It was the seventh user, wasn't it? He asked his teacher. Yep. Nana had a son as she trained Toshinori, and when her husband died because of the bastard that later killed her, she had to give up her son to keep him safe, Torino told him as Izuku nodded at him. I see, but I think I have a way around that, Izuku said as Torino looked at him. Each user of One for All had a helpline for their turn of the power, so I think that I need to find my helpline, he said as Torino looked at him. I see, so who are you going to pick? He asked the teen. I don't know yet, but I do know that each of the people I will pick will have something that I can gain in know-how, Izuku said as the elderly hero nodded. That makes sense. When you get back to school, you can pick your electives and extra classes, and there is no limit on the amount you can pick, Gran Torino said as Izuku looked at him. And with a mind like yours, I think that with you picking small bits and pieces of each class, you can become a great hero, even number 1, he said with a smile. Izuku smiled as well but shook his head. I don't think I'll aim for number 1. I think that I'll just go and save as many people around me as I can, he said as Gran Torino smiled at him. Then get some rest, As tomorrow we're going to fill out the forms for you, and you're going to have to talk with the press, he said as he walked to his bedroom. Izuku looked at him. Why am I talking to the press tomorrow? He asked the man. It's for 3 reasons, Gran Torino said as he held up 3 fingers. The first is to get to know who you are, the second is to see what type of hero you are, and the third is to see if you can be seen as a good choice of a hero, he told his student. Once Izuku was left alone, he got himself ready to sleep. He lay in front of the sofa and pulled a blanket over him. After a few hours, Eri woke up with a start before looking down at Izuku and so got off the couch and slept next to him. Inside one for all within a voice of tangled space with a large castle structure floating alone in the void of darkness. Sitting inside the structure are 8 figures. The first was a young man with a sickly and malnourished appearance and a weak body with white, messy hair similar to that reached to his shoulders, and his bangs usually obscured his bright green eyes. He wore simple clothes, wearing a white shirt and dark pants. He would occasionally be seen wearing a light blue jacket. The second was a man with short, salmon spiky hair, a large scar across his face, and a combat jacket with a large black collar. Then, there was a man with light, cold gray hair tied up in a spiky ponytail, a black bandana covering his forehead, and a combat jacket with small escape tubes coming out his shoulders. The fourth was a lean man with short, white hair that parted away from the base of his forehead. He had thin, green eyes that slant slightly downward, and 2 scar-like cracks stretched from the left side of his forehead to his chin. The fifth was a large, muscular man of a broad build. He had a square jaw, small dull blue eyes and lacked eyebrows. He was also bald and had a very short beard. He wore dark leather clothes, stylish golden goggles, and a bandolier. The leather jacket had yellow shoulder pads, and as Daigoro always had it open and didn't wear a shirt, it showed his muscular torso. The sixth was a reasonably short man with short, dark hair parted twice away from his narrow eyes. He wore an oversized red jacket with numerous straps and buttons and a high collar that obscured his mouth and nose. Dark, pretty, baggy pants and sizable white hiking boots accompany this. His forearms are also wrapped in sports tape. The seventh was the only woman there. She was beautiful and tall, with a curvy figure. At the same time, she was well built. She was fair-skinned and had a small mole below her bottom lip, centered to the right. She had sharp, intelligent eyes with long eyelashes. Her hair was dark and straight, kept shoulder length, except for a clump of short bangs hanging above her forehead. It was usually styled in a half-up half-down bun. Her clothes included a sleeveless bodysuit with a high collar, yellow elbow-length gloves, and white knee-high boots. Around her waist was a belt with an angular golden buckle. A small cape attached around the back hung down to her knees, and over her shoulders was a longer cape buttoned to the shoulders of her bodysuit. The final one was made of golden flames that resembled the 8th user, All Might. It seems that while he is not used to the power of One for All, he is slowly getting better at using it, the first man said, as the second and third said nothing to him. His martial arts will help him when he awakens our quirks, the fourth said as the others nodded. But who shall he awaken first? He asked as the others looked at him. In the order of us, I think, the 6th user said as everyone looked at him. I mean, you have more than quirk bestowal and power stockpile, he said as the sickly man nodded. Yes, my brother did give more quirks. Know them as the quirks that he thought useless, he said as the woman rubbed her chin. Is there any way to find out what quirks was added to One for All before it became One for All? She asked the others. It is possible, so let's go have a look around and see if we can get a glimpse of what's in here, the 5th user said. The others nodded before the first turned to the visage of All Might. I know that it would be a blessing if you could hear us, but if you can, make sure that the boy is ready. He needs to learn about us and the link to my brother, he said as the visage of All Might nodded. Izuku dedicatedly went through his kata in his workout clothes, his body emitting a slight golden aura. Gran Torino observed Izuku's movements, mindful not to disturb Eri's peaceful slumber. As the boy trained, a knock came at the door, and when the old man went, he found that it was Izuku's old martial arts master. May I come in? She asked the man who had moved to the side. She looked at Izuku with a smile before her body stood straight. Yame, she called out as the teen stopped and turned to her. May, Okami said as Izuku walked up. Gran Torino smiled at how she treated Izuku, who looked at her with the respect a student would have for their favorite teacher. Kid, Toshinori is on his way over. I'm heading out to get something. I'll be back in a little bit, he told the green-haired teen. Got you, Izuku called after him before turning to Okami and bowing to her. It's good to see you, master, he told her. And you cub, she told him as she set down her box and backpack. I'm just glad that your work coach allowed me to come today, Okami said as she looked at the sleeping girl. Izuku walked over, carefully picked up the table, and set it down while Okami sat down while Izuku made tea. It seems that your body is returning to using ki once more, Okami said as Izuku gathered the cups. Yes, and I still feel responsible for what I did to the dojo, Izuku told her as Okami sighed. That was not your fault, Okami said as he looked at her. You did not shut down the dojo. You did everything in your power to try and keep it up. It was I who shut down the dojo, she told him as he sighed. Yes, but if I did not go there, then it would not have had the need to be shut down, Izuku told her. As the two spoke from outside, Gran Torino listened to what they were saying with a somber look. It was because of his old status as quirkless, he thought as he listened. The one that got it shut down did not like the fact that their punching bag could fight back. Gran Torino thought as he walked down the road to the police station to ask them to look into the school that Izuku went to. Ehime Prefecture, Imabari, Gunhead Dojo Okako was going through the motions that her work coach was telling her before the news stopped everyone. Yesterday afternoon around 3 o'clock, a hero student within Koshu in the Yamanashi Prefecture apprehended the B-rank villain Overhaul, the news anchor said as they showed a video of Izuku and Overhaul fighting. Hey Uravati, isn't that guy in your class? A fellow Gunhead student asked as they watched Izuku fire a Juoken at Overhaul. Yeah, she said, shocked. We have named this new hero the Juken hero. Shishikyu, UA, as contracted as saying that this name was not the one he pinked in the classroom, but they see that as one he will live up to, the news anchor said as they turned to their colleague. Yes, he is quite the hero, and from what we have been told, he is getting interviewed later today by our very own Tina Mizuki. So I ask all the viewers to listen to what he has to say, the woman said before changing the topic. Ochako looked amazed before she pulled out her phone and tried to call Izuku. The call was disconnected immediately, so she texted him. Tokyo, Genius Office Bakugo was fuming as he listened to what the news said about his punching bag. Even what he used to fight the villain with. What the beep? I beeping stopped that shitty Deku from using that bullshit fighting style, but now's beeping doing it once more and he took down a B-rank villain with that shit, Bakugo screamed in his head. Best Jeanist raised a brow as his interns talked about, it has seemed that I should have picked him instead, he muttered as Bakugo turned to him with bloodshot eyes. Streets of Tokyo, the number 2 hero, Endeavor, ran with his intern and youngest son as they chased a villain down the street. Watch closely Shoto, Endeavor yelled out as they ran after him, with Shoto not that far behind. They chased a middle-aged man with light-colored hair, glasses, and a mustache. He wore brown pants with brown lofters, a white button-up shirt, a dark gold waistcoat, and a red bow tie. Why are we chasing him? Shoto asked his father. This man is Don Calma. He's a C-rank villain from Italy who has the quirk of change, and once you are hit by it, change your biological gender from one to the other, Endeavor said as they rounded a corner and found that they had trapped him. Give it up Calma, you have nowhere to run, the man told the villain who turned to Endeavor. So it seems, but I have a gift for you, Calma said as he pulled out a pink vial and threw it at them. Endeavor covered his face as the vial landed, and the pink liquid turned into a gas that Shoto inhaled. When he did, Shoto fell to the floor, screaming in pain. Calma ran out, and Endeavor ran after the man. Shoto convulsed as he felt his body change. His figure started to change as his back arched, his beeps began to grow, and his waist got smaller and more curved. His skin moved out as his hair grew slowly until it reached past his neck. Shoto felt more of his body change as he encased himself within ice to help his body. After 10 minutes, Endeavor returned and melted the ice around his youngest son. No, youngest daughter, who lay on the ground, was knocked out from the pain, and he rushed them to the hospital. Later in the day, Yamanashi Prefecture, Koshu, Japan News Yamanashi Base, interview set. Over in the set, there are 2 people in black leather chairs. The first was the host, a young woman with orangish-brown hair, brown eyes, and light-colored skin dressed in a pink skirt, a pink button-up shirt, red high-heel shoes and a white undershirt. And the other was Izuku, sitting in his new hero costume, his Gamma version. His costume was a four-piece bodysuit with a torso and arms, gloves, legs, and boots. The boots, as did the gloves, had a sneaker-style design and a lion paw motif. The suit was primarily forest green with golden markings over the arms and legs. On his chest, there was a three-claw symbol. Around his waist was a utility belt, and to finish his costume was a hooded cloak that looked like a lion's head. A man with a camera crew was speaking in the next room as the news was being broadcast before a man raised a hand, saying, 5 seconds. Izuku breathed and started channeling his ki as his eyes turned green to gold. The man's finger landed on one as a sign with, on air, lit up. Hello everyone, it's me, Tina Mizuki, your word in the hero world about upcoming heroes or hero students that we think can make it, Tina said as she then induced Izuku, and with me today is a first-year UA student Izuku Midoriya, or the Juken hero. Shishikyu. Now then Shishikyu, can you tell us a little about yourself? Tina asked Izuku. Well, I'm a massive hero nerd. I love studying quirks and I'm a massive fan of the pre-quirk era, Izuku said, and the woman looked shocked. The pre-quirk era, you say, she said to Izuku, who nodded at her. Why is that? Tina asked. 3 reasons why. The first is that I like to see where we come from. The second is the games, films, merchandise, cars, and stories from that era. And the final one is the history of the world that people either don't know or just don't care about, Izuku told her as she nodded. I see. Well, get back to that later, alright, Tina told Izuku, who nodded. Now then, can you tell me your reason for being a hero? She asked Izuku. Oh, that an easy yet difficult question, Izuku said as he scratched his cheek. Musutafu, UA High School, Teachers Lounge. All the teachers were watching the interview on TV. Oh, how is that? Tina asked Izuku. Well, then, I was younger. Even when I first started in the UA I was going to become a hero to help people smile. But now, after meeting a few people, I realize that is not the hero I need to be, Izuku said. The teachers looked at each other in confusion, and Izuku narrowed his eyes. What is the hero? The reporter asked him. One that works to help everyone, and I mean not just the people that need saving, but people who have so-called weak quirks or so-called villainous quirks, or even the quirkless. I want people off all them to look to me one day and say that I want to be like him, Izuku told her. What do you mean when you said, so-called weak or villainous quirks? Tina asked. There is no such thing as weak or villainous quirks, Izuku said as Tina raised a brow at him. All quirks have their good and bad parts. There is no strong or weak. My mother has a quirk called attraction of small things, which can do as it says. She can use telekinesis on small objects. Now, people could say that a quirk is not fit for a hero, but I disagree. Her quirk can take a gun from someone, a knife even. But she is known as the devil's right hand in the courtroom, he said as Tina's eyes shot wide. The greatest prosecutor in Japan? Tina asked as the teacher's eyes widened. Yep, Izuku. Tokyo Hospital, room M17. Shoto lay in bed as she watched the TV with Izuku's interview. And what about villainous quirks? Tina asked. Once more, there is no such thing, as I can label 3 heroes at this moment that could have quirks labeled as villainous. But I shall not, as I do not want any trouble. But for an example, why there is no such thing as with the person I faced in the sports festival, Izuku said as the woman nodded. Hitoshi Shinso. He has the quirk brainwashing. And while people at home is asking why is that quirk one for a hero, and the answer is hostage situations, talking people down. You name a job that a hero need to do and he could do it, the teen said as the woman nodded with him. I see, Shoto said as she looked out the window with a small smile. And what about the quirkless? Tina asked. Genius office. All the interns and best genists listened to what he had to say next. I was found as quirkless before my quirk activated, Izuku told her as she looked shocked once more, and it was late, as in when I did the exam for UA, but I had my key, or did, he said before he sighed, and Tina narrowed her eyes. What do you mean, did? She asked him. Izuku stayed quiet for a while before he spoke. When I was younger, around just turning 7, I started to go to a dojo to help me become a hero. The dojo was called the Pai Wa Academy, and it was where I learned my Geki Juken, but some people did not like that I could now fight back, he said as Tina looked confused before she gasped. By fighting back, do you mean, she asked sadly. Defend myself, Izuku asked, and she nodded. Yes, as I was seen as quirkless, I was an easy target for them to use their quirks on me, and the teachers did nothing and let it happen. But when I could defend myself, the teachers and students who attacked me did not like it, so they got together and made sure the dojo was shut down, he told her. Bakugo could feel eyes on him, and he turned to Best Jeanist, who was narrowing his eyes at him. What? He barked at the hero. The number 4 hero said nothing as he returned his eyes to the TV. And then what happened? Tina asked Izuku, who smiled sadly. The dojo was shut down, and I felt that I was the one that was at fault, Izuku told her. Ehime Prefecture, Imabari, Gunhead Dojo. All the students looked shocked, and the women wanted to hug him. Oh, Deku, Ochako whispered. But there was nothing you could have done, Tina tried to tell Izuku, who shook his head. No, I could not have fought back, I could have just used speed to move out of the way, go to the police, or do something else, and that is on me for fighting back, and doing so I let down not only my masters but my inner lion. So I sealed off my ki as I felt that I was unworthy for the gift that I tried in for 3 years, Izuku said as Tina looked shocked. So you kept all that power and guilt for 6 years, she asked him. Yes, Izuku nodded at her. Ochako could say nothing like the other girls and women felt for the teen. But you used it to stop Overhaul, Tina told him. Gunma Prefecture, Kiryu, 4th Kind Agency Kirishima, Tetsu, and 4th Kind watched as Kirishima thought back. Isn't Midori bro and Baku bro from the same school? Would that mean? Kirishima asked in his head. That I did, and I was stiff in my movements that halted me from fight more efficiently, Izuku said as Tina raised a brow. More efficiently, she asked him. I could have used several different techniques to help fight Overhaul, but I went with more psychical ones that kept me on the back foot, Izuku explained to her. What do you mean? Tina asked him. Overhaul could change matter, and only people with an energy-based quirk could have fought him. Ki worked for me, but I used it in my fists and feet instead of using some of the other things that Ki can do, he told her as she nodded. Fukuoka Prefecture, Shikushino, Hawks Agency Tokiyami and the Hawks watched the TV as the hero whistled. Dame, I've never heard anyone talk like that, the Hawks said, and Tokiyami nodded. Indeed, Midoriya is someone who always will fight away, he is that type of man, and I am proud to call him friend, Tokiyami said as Hawks raised a brow. But I know now that I am happy that I did what I could, and saved a little girl in the process, Izuku said with a smile. That a good thing, and I have a question, are you going to be aiming for number 1 hero? Tina asked as Izuku shook his head. No, he said as Tina once more looked shocked, as did Hawks and Tokiyami. Hiroshima Prefecture, Fukuyama, Hibike Agency Momo, Kendo, and Uwabami sat in a back room during the interview. He's not aiming to be number 1, Uwabami asked, confused. What do you mean you're not aiming for number 1? Tina asked Izuku, who shook his head. No, I care not about becoming number 1. What is important to me when I become a hero is making sure that people say, I feel safe with him around. So I do not care that I become number 1, or number 1000, Izuku told her as the reporter nodded at him. Can I ask why? Tina asked him, and Momo wanted to know the same thing. Chiba Prefecture, Ichikawa, Strongarm Agency Kyoka and Death Arms watched the TV, with the hero looking shocked that the kid he shouted at and passed over was now on TV and being praised for doing a job that a pro hero should have done. Sure, and the reason is because everyone, even the heroes, puts all the pressure on the number 1, that any man or woman can break under the pressure. All Might has done so many times, Izuku said, shocked. Kyoka before she nodded at Izuku was the ultimate hero fanboy, but that does not mean that I want to pressure when I become a hero, as they say, pressure makes diamonds, but I'm mainly doing it for the people, he said as Tina nodded. By that you mean the types of people you mentioned before, she asked him. Yes, Izuku said with a nod. And even when I'm out of costume and walking the streets and pass someone, I want them to look at the TV and smile, as they have not seen me but something someone has done, he told her as the reporter nodded at him, a smile forming on her face. Yamagata Prefecture, Kaminoyama, Turtle Hermet Agency. Ojiro stood next to the number 20 hero, dressed in a karate gi but was orange and had a brown furred tail around his waist. So you care more for the people than the title of number 1, Tina asked. That's right, as I think that people should come before villain, Izuku said as the woman nodded. If there was a burning building, I would save the people inside, I would save tea house people, but as someone had set the building on fire, I will still save the people and then look that person, he said as the woman nodded. I steams that he's got his head on right, the hero said as Ojiro nodded. He would do anything for his classmates, and I know he will go far when he becomes a pro hero, Ojiro said as the man smiled at his intern. Tokyo, Minato, Sailor Agency Aoyama was standing next to a woman who wore a white chest-armored leotard with a blue sailor collar that had 3 white stripes on it, white gloves with 3 red arm fittings that reached just below her elbows, yellow 3-looped shoulder pads. A wavy blue skirt with a puffy white belt sat above it, along with a reddish-pink bow on the chest and at the back. She also sports a pair of reddish-pink short-heeled knee-high boots with a white border at the triangular top that has gold crescent moons, earrings consisting of gray studs with gold stars and crescent moons beneath, white-bordered red circular hairpieces, one on each odango, 2 white-winged hair clips in her hair, and a white choker with a gold crescent moon on it. So for you, the people come first, and to use your analogy on you, if someone was being held at gunpoint with people having bombs strapped to their chests, you would pick the people with the bombs? Tina asked him as Aoyama kept himself from flinching as he looked at Izuku. Yes, but I would never lose the gunman or the arsonist in my scenario, Izuku told her as Tina looked confused. Why is that? Tina asked. Geki Juken, it allows me to channel my animal spirit, as I am doing right now, Izuku said as he indicated to his eyes. Tina looked and nodded. I want to go through this interview without freaking out, so I am channeling my lion spirit, make me more confident, he said as Tina nodded. Saitama Prefecture, Toda, Mask Agency Shoji stood with a man with short white hair and a jacket whose collar hit the bottom half of his face. So you mean to tell me that you can enhance your abilities, such as smell, hearing, and taste? Tina asked him, and Izuku nodded. Even sight, Izuku added as Shoji nodded his head. Your classmate is quite the young man, Shoji's tutor said as a tentacle turned into a mouth. Yeah, he's a good person and I know who would help me out if I was in need, Shoji said as he smiled a hidden smile. Osaka Prefecture, Kaizuka, Wolf Agency Koda was sitting on a leather sofa, petting a big white dog as he listened to the interview. That sounds amazing, what else can it do? Tina asked him. Izuku rubbed his head as he smiled. Ki can grant its UESR to call on the elements, like fire, lighting, or ice, he told her as Tina's eyes once more were ready to pop out of her head. Now that is amazing, she said as Izuku nodded. Yeah, but I can't do that just yet, as I still need training, he said with a small smile. Tokyo Prefecture, Hosu, Manual Office Manual was standing in his office as he and all but one of his interns watched the TV. What is Ki? You have said that and I would like to know that it is, Tina asked him. Ki is physical energy that is made corporeal by mixing it with spiritual and mental energies in our bodies, Izuku said with a smile as Tina scratched her cheek. That is what Ki is, but there is a caveat for that, he said. What do you think that is? A girl asked as she looked at the screen. It has to be age, a sidekick said. The only time that Ki can be awoken is when you are around 7 years old, he said as the sidekick nodded. Fukushima Prefecture, Soma, Mount Agency Mount Lady lay on her couch watching the interview, with Mineta hovering behind her. At the same time, Kodai sat in a chair, watching the news. That is a tricky age to learn something, Tina asked as Izuku nodded. I will not lie and say that it was easy, Izuku said before he smiled. But it worked, as when you awaken your Ki, it's a feeling like no other, he said with a smile so gentle that both Mount Lady and Kodai blushed at it. And Tina was the same. Now, back to what you said earlier. You like the pre-quirk era. What are some of the things you like about it? She asked him. Hokkaido, Eniwa, White Lion Office Kaminari was with 6 other people acting as interns for a man with most of his face covered with silver hair as they watched the interview. Well, the first thing I like is the films that were created then, classics like Lord of the Rings or Jurassic Park. They're legendary pieces of film history, Izuku said as Tina nodded at him. Then there are the books that were released at that time. American Gods, or Game of Thrones, both are classics, he told her. I see, are there anything else that you think are good from the pre-quirk era, Tina asked him. Okinawa Prefecture, Okinawa Islands, Kumejima, Butcher Shot. Hagakure stood with her teacher, who was a woman with black hair worn in box braids tied in a ponytail. I like the games from that era as well, whether they're board games, tabletop games, or video games, Izuku told Tina, who nodded at him. And what is your favorite of each type of tea house? The reporter asked him. Well, for board games, I like the game Risk Legacy. It is an excellent game to play with your friends. For tabletop games, it has to be Warhammer 40k, and then the video game goes. I really like the franchise of Borderlands, Izuku told Tina, who nodded. I see. When I get back, I'll see if I can play any of those games with him, Hagakure said as the hero she was training under turned to her. So you like him? She asked her. Tokushima Prefecture, Naruto, Night Light Office. Sato stood next to a married couple dressed as knights as they watched the TV. I see, but I have a question about that era, and that is why do you like it? I myself feel like it is not that important to the modern day, Tina said to Izuku, who nodded at her. That is true that it might seems that it is not as important to modern day, until you start look at the right thing from that era, Izuku said as Sada smiled. There it is, he said as the married couple looked at him confused. Toyama Prefecture, Himi, Burning Sword Agency Siro, Tokage, Yanagi, and the hero were underwatched the screen. What do you mean? Tina asked. Take what happened when people stood up for themselves or their people, and it made history, and people like that did not have a voice, like some people in today's society, but through actions that did not turn to violence, they managed to make their voice heard, and if people looked back, and looked to the people they would get more people to them, Izuku said as Tina nodded with him. Iwate Prefecture, Morioka, Insect Office Mina stood with a woman with butterfly wings as they both listed the interview. I see, and I'll do that so that I can Togoru and become a batter reporter, Tina said as Izuku nodded. Now then only a few more questions, Tina said as the Shishiken user nodded. Sure, Izuku said. What is the name of your quirk and what does it do, as you've said that it awakened late, Tina said to Izuku. That's true, I call it superpower, but that is only a placeholder for the moment as I have not really had a chance to put a name to my quirk, and it is an energy quirk, allowing me to transfer energy from one place to another, and even enhance my body, Izuku told her as Tina nodded as Mina's eyes started to narrow. Why is my bullshit senses going off, she asked herself. Chiba, Oki Mariner Suyu stood next to Selkie and serious as Selkie started to think. Why do I feel like he's lying, Kiro? Suyu thought as the interview winded down. It seems that I only have enough time for one last question, Tina asked Izuku, who nodded. The Public Safety Commission got in touch with our station when this interview happened and has said that if you can capture the hero killer before end of your internship, they will grant you the status of pro hero. Would you accept? Tina asked him. Yamanashi Prefecture, Koshu, Japan News Yamanashi Base, interview set. I do not know as I do not wish to fight him, but if I do face him and come out on top, I shall fight him with all I have and if I can beat him then that is that, but if not, I shall do everything in my power to save the heroes that he has gone after, Izuku said as Tina nodded at him. I see and that is everything, Tina said as she turned to the camera. Thank you all for watching today and back to the news, she said as the engine on air turned off. Izuku let out a sigh as his eyes turned back to green. You did well, Tina said as both of them stood up, and Izuku shook her hand and walked out to meet Gran Torino, All Might, his mother, and Master Okami. You did well, Cub, Okami told Izuku, who nodded. She's right, now then, let's get back to my apartment so that we can concentrate training, Gran Torino said as she walked out before Eri rounded a corner and ran full pelt at Izuku. Izuku looked at Eri before he looked at his mother. Mom, Master, I have to tell you something, he told the two women. Izuku and Okami were sparring, emanating aura from their respected animal spirits. Watching them with wide eyes, Eri was amazed at the power and potential she saw in them. Izuku was also using one for all as well. They were dressed in unique Chinese tunics, each reflecting their individuality. Izuku's was a striking black and gold, while Okami's was a regal purple with the distinctive three-claw marking on the left pectoral. They wore black zuban with lines going down the legs, Izuku's with gold accents, and Okami's with purple. Other than that, they had bandages over their hands and feet. Gran Torino couldn't help but marvel at Izuku's rapid progress. It's only been 3 short days since he figured it out, and he's already using it like he's had it all his life, he remarked to Toshinori and Inko, who was equally astounded by the spectacle. Izuku and Okami moved away from each other before the master of the Okamikan stopped the spar. "Game," she said as Izuku lowered his stance, "you're getting back to what you were and then some," Okami told Izuku. "Thank you, master," Izuku said with deep respect, bowing to her in gratitude for her guidance. "A phone call is here. A phone call is here. A phone call is here," All Might's phone said as it went off as the man stepped aside to answer it. Gran Torino walked over to Izuku and pocked him in the chest. "Your hold of one for all is getting better as well," he told him. Izuku bowed to him. "Thank you, sir," he said. But the elderly hero waved his off. "Hey, cut that out. There's no need for it," he said as he smiled at Izuku, who smiled back. "You have to be kidding, Tsukachi," All Might's voice said from the other room as the 5 looked over. Inko wanted to go check, and when she saw him, he walked back in and put his phone on speaker. "You on speaker, Tsukachi," All Might said. "Right then, is Izuku Midoriya there?" Tsukachi asked. "I am," Izuku said as he looked at the phone. "Good, right then, I'll cut to the chase. The Hero Public Safety Commission were not joking like we all thought they were," he said as the others looked at each other while Okami narrowed her eyes. "So they want him to take in the hero killer," she said, and the man on the other end of the line sighed. "So it seems," Tsukachi said as the sound of shuffling papers came over the phone. "And what's more saddening is that we know that the hero killer is in Hosu, so the commission wants Izuku to go there and fight," he said as Eri's eyes widened. "But he can't," she said as everyone nodded. "And I agree, but it seems that the commission thinks he is just the person they need to take down the hero killer," Tsukachi told them before he sighed. "But he's in a no-win scenario here," he said. "How?" Izuku asked him. "If you go to Hosu and beat the hero killer, it will start a whole thing that will say that the police are incompetent and the pro-heroes more so," Tsukachi said as Izuku nodded. "On the other hand, if you don't show up, you'll be called a coward," he told Izuku, who sighed. "Then I'm going to have to go to Hosu," Izuku said as the others looked at him. "Why is that, Cub?" Okami asked as Izuku handed her his phone, who saw that his classmates had all messaged about the interview he did. "All but one. Ida has been blocking class from everyone, and look at all the messages I've sent him," Izuku said as the Geki Juken did and saw that they were all unread. "When did this start?" Tsukachi asked Izuku. "When his brother was attacked by the hero killer, and I've dug something up about the hero killer that you might want to look into," Izuku said as he heard once more shuffling of papers. "And that is," he asked Izuku. "All the heroes that he has attacked were all in the business for something not so right, and thanks to them, a lot of people died. The first of that not being the case is Ingenium," Izuku said as All Might narrowed his eyes in thought. "I have 3 examples. Nova Commander, he was killed by the hero killer 2 years ago. He was using his influence to abduct women and raping them. Dunker was a drug dealer as well as him being a hero," he said as others looked at him in shock. "Dame," Gran Torino muttered under his breath. "And the third?" Tsukachi asked Izuku. "Drilldark, he stole around 10 to 20 million euro from the Bank of Tokyo," Izuku said as they nodded. "So why do you think that the hero killer targeted Ingagenum?" the detective asked him. "I think that it was the case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time," Izuku said before he sighed. "At least I hope so," he added. "Don't we all? But why are you saying that?" All Might said as he looked at Izuku. "Ida has chosen to have his internship in Hosu," Izuku said as everyone's eyes shot wide. "Then you're going to have to go and make sure that young Ida gets home safely," All Might said. Izuku nodded, and once he saw that Eri had tears in her eyes, he knelt down. "Hey, I won't be long," he told her as she looked up at him. "You promise?" she asked him. "On my lion spirit," he told her as she hugged him, and Izuku stood back up and went to change. "Cub," Okami called out as she tossed something over to him. When he caught it, he found that it was a case. "It's something that Lee made," she told Izuku, who nodded and went to change. "What did this Lee give him?" Gran Torino asked as All Might ended the call. Okami smiled at him. "Lions are good hunters," But he's going to need something that will eve the field with the hero killer, who was said to use blades, she told them. 3 hours later, on the train heading towards Hosu, Izuku sat across from Gran Torino as he heard the whispers around him. "Does it get easier?" Izuku asked the man, who shrugged at his student. "I don't know, as I was never a high-ranking hero," Torino said as they looked outside. "Now the commission has given you the permission to use your quirk today, just to let you know," he told Izuku. "Thanks." Izuku nodded as he looked outside at the night sky. He thought back to his friend and how his eyes looked. "Ida, please don't do anything stupid," Izuku thought before many people started to rush to a window. "Hey, what's that?" one of them said. "What the?" Izuku said before something burst into the train. Tokyo Prefecture. Hosu, Shigaraki and Kurogiri stood on a water tower and looked down at the destruction their Nomus were coursing. "Now this can help him, don't you think, Kurogiri?" Shigaraki asked as he laughed at what he watched. The screams that filled the air brought joy to the man before something caught his eye as he saw that the train had been stopped. A Nobu was sent flying out of it, and it was from a blast of golden energy. "That lion brat," Shigaraki growled as he watched as Izuku jumped out of the train. With Izuku sparked with one for all as he fell towards the Nomu he had punched off the train. "Leo smash," Izuku called out as a lion's head formed around his fist. When he punched the Nomu, it was sent flying into the ground. When the teen landed on the ground, the heroes looked at him in shock. "Did he just take that out with one hit?" one of the heroes asked as Gran Torino landed beside Izuku. "I see that thing is out for the count," Torino said as he looked at his student, who nodded. They both looked up as they heard flapping heading their way. Izuku looked up as his body sparked with cyan lighting around him as he rushed at the creature and had his fist cocked back. His fist glowed gold as he punched the flying Nomu. "Okayan," Izuku called out as the flying Nomu landed on its back. "Ida, where are you? Ida, do you hear me?" Izuku heard as he turned to see Manuel, who looked around for the teen. "Gran Torino," Izuku called out. "I heard. Make sure that kid is safe and, if need be, engage," the old man called out before he kicked another Nomu heading his way. Izuku's body started to give off a charcoal aura as he took deep breaths and listened to what was around him. He heard the wind blowing, the fire roars, people's screams and cheers. And then he found him, and he started running. With his quirk and key, he moved past people quickly, then moved up a wall and started running across the roofs. He ran on all fours, and his speed increased. He reached a point on the roof where he could look down at an alleyway and found his friend with the pro hero, Native, on the ground. Izuku pulled out a small folded-up bird. "Todoroki, the hero killer is it." Izuku soaked into the bird. He tossed the bird in the air as its wings folded out, and it took flight. Izuku looked down at the hero killer and found that he was an intimidating, muscular man who walked with a distinct hunch, had a flat, somewhat triangular face, and an extraordinarily long tongue tainted with numerous small papillae. He had long black hair, which he wore messily. It would drape over his face. He sported a dark combat suit, plated with metal armor across his body to holster his weapons. The torso was sleeveless, so he wrapped his arms in yellow bandages from just below his shoulders to his wrists. The hero killer also wore long black wristbands and a watch on his left arm, and his knees were protected with metal pads. Black boots with steel armor and spikes completed the costume. He constantly donned his signature blood-red scarf, matching headband, and the tattered cloth he wore around his face as a mask. The man moved over to Ida with a raised sword, so Izuku had no time to waste, and he shot forward. The hero killer turned to him and crossed his arms, using that to block the fist coming his way. After knocking away the man, Izuku landed and moved into his starting stance. "So you're him," the hero killer said as he looked at Izuku. "I could be, and can I ask you what you were doing to my classmate?" Izuku said as he moved his hand to something behind his cloak-like cape. "Just purging the fakes," Stain said as they stepped closer. "I'm not letting you get closer to them," Izuku said as he stood his ground. "Ida, can you move?" he asked his classmate. "No, he's got his quirk on," Ida said as Izuku nodded. "I'm going to guess that you've done the same to Native," he asked the man, who nodded. "I see," Izuku said as his stance lowered and his other hand went behind the cape. So Izuku pulled out a pair of Dao broadswords, resting one on his shoulder while holding the other ready to attack. So you use swords as well? The hero killer asked as he drew two katanas and held them. A lion while uses his fists in battle will at times use a sword, Izuku told the other. Midoriya get away stain in mine, Ida called out as Izuku looked down at the teen. What are you talking about, Ida? Izuku asked as Stain did not move. Ida looked at him with hateful eyes. Stain make my brother could never walk ever again, and so I shall kill him for revenge, Ida called out. Oh, be quiet, you fake. You know nothing. Your brother had the chance to walk away, but he stayed and fought me after I removed another fake from the world, Stain told the teen as he rushed forward, and Izuku locked blades with the man. The two moved and clashed with their swords, neither giving an inch, but Izuku compensated for his lack of skill by using his quirk to have him match Stain. So, Shishikyu, are you hoping to stall me? Stain asked Izuku as they locked swords again. Yes, if it was just my classmate, I could have taken them and run, but with native here, I have to stay, fight, and defend as they cannot, Izuku told him as they were still in the stalemate. Too bad then, Stain said as he cut at Izuku's arm. You put up a good fight, but I have work to do, he told Izuku as he licked the blood from the sword and Izuku collapsed to the floor. So that's how it works, Izuku said as he could not move. Not even a finger. But he could feel his ki. Yes, and as you're on his way to becoming a Touré hero, I must make sure that none try to leech off you, Stain said as he raised his sword above Ida again. Thankfully, a jet of fire shot forward over Ida toward the man as the hero killer jumped back, avoiding it. Midoriya, it seems that I have to say send more information next time, but I now know how hard it was, so I shall not complain, Shoto said as she walked up. Ida and Izuku blinked at her. What? She asked them. How are you a girl? Izuku asked. I'll tell you later, Todoroki said as Izuku conferred and started to channel his ki. Geki Vaza Oo Dan. Izuku called out as his lion spirit jumped out of his body and started to attack Stain. She then sent out a wave of ice that allowed Izuku and the native to slide down to her and Ida as she shot out another blast of fire. The pros are on the way, Soto told them. Stain moved out of the way of the lion spirit and the jet of fire. Don't let him cut you, or he'll take your blood, and then he'll take it in, and then you'll be like us, Izuku told her as she nodded. That explains the blades on him, she told Izuku. As the lion spirit moved, Izuku looked over his sabes, which he held and felt for his ki. Shoto sent more flames out as she looked down at Izuku, who seemed to be meditating. But she turned back to the hero killer as he moved past the lion and threw knives at Shoto, summoned ice to block the knives before she sent out another blast of fire at the man. The lion moved Stain away from Shoto, and she turned to Ida, who told her that Stain was his and they should not get in the way. She then started to tell him off, and he looked at her, shocked before Izuku felt something. His fingers. They moved. I see. Return. Izuku ordered the lion spirit, who looked at him before returning to Izuku and disappearing as the teen stood. Stain looked at Izuku with narrowed eyes as he landed. So he must be Type O, he thought before Izuku stood the stance he did with the sword once more. Trying that once more, Stain asked Estanku. Yes, but I'm going for a different animal, Izuku said as he let out his ki, and Stain saw that it was not gold. It is cyan. So shall we see how a shark will do? Izuku asked as he moved in to attack Stain. Who blocked one sword before he saw the other one coming and moved his sword to stop that one. But he blinked as Izuku moved his sword until the flats were locked with Stain's and moved to cut at the man's hands. Stain then moved away and let go of his swords, but Izuku did not give up. As he moved in, the hero killer pulled out knives. Is it just me or are any of you kids seeing a shark attack a man right now? Native asked as in his eyes, he saw a cyan shark biting at Stain. The Stain moved out of the alleyway, and Ida regained his ability to walk. The teen then walked over to the down hero and lifted him. The three walked to the exit and watched as the two swordsmen fought. No inch was given to either of them as a crowd formed around them, with police stopping anyone from getting closer. Izuku and Stain locked Stains as the man looked at Izuku's hands and saw they were healed. Nice skill you have, he said to Izuku. Yes, it's called ki healing allowing me to fix my body, Izuku told him. The Juken hero looked around and saw the crowd before he narrowed his eyes as the cyan aura he was giving off started to burst out of him like a geyser. He moved his hands until he connected the two swords as they became one. "I'm sorry Stain, but to keep everyone safe I have to put an end to this," Izuku said as Stain smiled. Izuku. "Then show me that you can," he told Izuku, who nodded as the aura turned into water. Stain looked shocked as Izuku vanished and was replaced by a shark. "Geki Saber Samaken Ju no Kata. Ueda same," Izuku called out as he and the shark spirit burst forward at fantastic speed. The shark opened its mouth to bite down on Stain as Izuku passed him with a slash. Stain turned his head to Izuku, who sheathed his dao behind his back as the water fell around them like rain. Stain and Izuku had to turn to each other before Stain fell to the floor and was knocked out. Izuku smiled as the police moved in, cuffed the hero killer, and moved him into the back of a van. Cuts opened on Izuku's arms, and the teen fell to his knees. 3 hours later, Hosu Hospital. Izuku, Ida, and Shoto were all in the same room as Izuku lay in bed. "Midoriya, Todoroki, Ida said as Shoto and Izuku waved him off. "It's what a friend is for," Izuku said as Shoto nodded. "What he said," she told Ida as she saw that Izuku was looking at her. "What?" Shoto asked him. "Can you tell us why you're a girl now?" Izuku asked her. "A C-rank villain used his Kurik on me with the added ability of Trigger to make it permanent," Shoto told Izuku, who nodded. "And why are you in that bed?" she asked him. "Samaken is not something that can be called on without the right training that I have not had," Izuku said as he raised his arm, which looked like teeth marks to the shock of Shoto and Ida. "If you have not mastered the forms of Samaken, unlike the other animals, the shark bites, and I used the 10th form of the sword style of Samaken," he told them as they looked shocked. "That is putting it lightly, cub," Okami's voice said from the door as she walked in with Gran Torino, Eri, the police chief, and Manuel. "Papa," Eri called out as she ran over to Izuku, who managed to lift her up. "You're hurt," she said as she looked at his arms with sad eyes. "It was my fault," he said as his master nodded. "It was. I'm going to contact Master Umisame, and she can train you in using the Samaken without the shark biting you," she told him. "Anyway, now then, first, Shishikyu, I thank you for capturing the hero killer, and you shall be sent his bounty along with the one from Overhaul as the bounty that was assigned has been made," the police chief said to Izuku. "And with that, you are now a pro hero, the youngest ever to be given the rank," the man said as Izuku nodded. Ida and Shoto looked at Izuku, amazed, and then the man turned to Ida. "Can you tell me why you were there?" he asked the teen. Ida stayed quiet for a while before he told the policeman everything. "I see, and while you would be normally under arrest for what you had done, it was thanks to your classmate that you were alive," he told the teen. "I understand that, sir," Ida said as he bowed his head. "Rage clouded my mind, and I could not," he said before he shook his head. "Normally, I would tell UA to give you a suspension, but seeing your friends put their lives on the line for you is going to be punishment enough from me," the chief told Ida. "I understand, sir," Ida told him as the chief nodded before he stepped out. "Kid," Gan Torino said as Ida looked over to him, "go talk with Hound Dog when you get back to school. He'll help you out, it will get that shit off your chest," he said as Izuku covered Eri's ears from the curse word. Language, both Izuku and Ida called to the man, who just shrugged as he walked out. Unknown location. League of Villains bar. Shigaraki scratched his neck as he watched TV, and it irked him that anything being talked about was Stain. That stupid hero killer. What the beep does he know about the needs to be done to this world? All it needs is to be destroyed and turned to dust, Shigaraki thought as he listened to what the news reporter said. All the while, Kurogiri looked at his young master. "It seems that the raid was a failure," a voice on another TV said as Kurogiri turned to it. "Yes and no, my lord, it seems that the news thinks that we working with Stain," the smokeman said as he heard a hum, "but it seems that Shigaraki was right in thinking that he would not work as part of the League, as the man wants heroes in the world, as he phased that student in one-on-one combat," Kurogiri said. "I see," the voice said as he vanished for a while before his voice returned. "It seems that we need more people for the League, so set out and get some that you think will bring the change in the world you want," the voice told Shigaraki, who nodded. "Yes, sensei," he told his master as he went to his phone. Unknown location. A man that wore a dark helmet sat in the darkness as he closed the link to the bar. It seems, younger brother, that you now have that boy. I can feel that he had one for all, and he seems to use it better than that fool All Might, the man thought as he smiled evilly, and so the pawn is in place, and it seems that you are no longer the king. It is this Izuku Midoriya, and he has no one on his side, no rooks, no knights, not a bishop or a queen, not a pawn, he has nothing, and soon I shall reclaim that is mine, the man thought as his smile turned sinister. He then turned to look at the doctor working on the next batch of Nomu. He could not wait to see what quirks they would have and how useful they would be. The next day, Yamanashi Prefecture, Koshu, Gran Torino's apartment. Izuku was back at Gran Torino's apartment, holding a pro-hero license as his mother cooked food for everyone there. I have to say, kid, you did good work, Gran Torino said as Izuku smiled. That is high praise coming from him, young Midoriya. He has only said that to me once, and that once was when I got first in the festival, All Might said as everyone looked at the old man. What? This knucklehead could not work out how to not break a pencil with his new strength, Gran Torino told them as they looked over to All Might, who scratched his cheek. Before anyone could say anything, the news came on. Hello, everyone, as you now know, the hero killer stain was bright last night by the newest hero on the block, the Juken hero, Shishiku, and he has already been given a rank, the news reporter said as Izuku looked shocked. I have a rank already, Izuku asked as the others looked equally shocked. He's now ranked 13th in all of Japan. That is quite a rank for his first coming as a hero, the news reporter said. Izuku's eyes widened and looked like they would pop out of his head. I'm 13th, Izuku asked faintly with all the shock. And I bet you all at home wonder why he got such a high score for his outing, the male reporter said as he paused. You telling us, Inko said as she sat down so she would not faint. The reason is because of him taking out 3 A rank villains along with his original taking down of Overhaul, a B rank, and so, all that together, he does deserve to be given this first step into his career, the female reporter said, as everyone did not know what to say. That was not all. He saved a fellow student from being killed last night along with the pro-hero, Native, so that adds to his getting his license, she said. I'm glad he's out there, and it seems that UA has said that he will still be thought there if he wishes, the male reporter said before he moved to another piece of paper. In other news, the building of the new Paiwa Academy has been done, with the help of our #1 hero. While he did not want to be on camera, he was reported to say that he thinks that all should have the means to fight back, so he will be backing the dojo from here on out, he said as Izuku and Okami looked at the man in shock. He scratched his cheek. Well, after hearing about this, I have been finding a spot next to UA for you to return to training and tell the world I was wrong, All Might said as he looked at Izuku. Anyone can be a hero if they are given the chance to prove that they will want to make it, he told his successor. Both users of Geki Juken stood up and bowed to the man as the party started. Tokyo, Genius Office Bakugo was now smoldering in pure hate as he listened to the news about how they were bringing back that dojo. It pissed him off so much, and he was ready to attack someone. And so when Best Genius told him they were going out on patrol, his mood changed slightly. But his mood returned to being pissed off as kids were just talking about Izuku. Damn that beeping shitty Deku. I'm the one that deserves to be the one people are talking about, not some 2-bit beeping shit quirk bastard, and now he's a beeping hero now, he thought as he passed a TV that showed Izuku in his new hero costume with his Geki saber in his hands. Quiks mean everything in this world, not anything else, and I will prove it, as when I face that Deku I will destroy him in front of everyone, Bakugo thought as Best Genius looked at him out of the corner of his eye. It seems that he's not cut out to be a hero after all. I shall have to make that report to Aizawa, Best Genius thought as they walked. All the teachers of UA were sitting around their staff table as they looked at each other with one thing on everyone's mind. How do we, as teachers and heroes, address the issue of students from Aldera Junior High who have joined UA, apart from Izuku? Overall, we have had 9 students from Aldera, not counting Midoriya, Midnight said as she looked at the paper. And one of them is Bakugo, Aizawa said as he looked at Bakugo's student paper. First, it needs to be known if Midoriya's claims are right, he said as the others looked at him. They are, Nezu confirmed with a heavy sigh, and there's more. From my investigation, It appears they were subjecting Midoriya to the same treatment you did, he revealed, causing Aizawa to look down in shame. But I have a feeling that they did it not to make him better, the man said as the white-furred animal nodded. This is a grave matter. Upon careful review of the evidence, I am strongly considering expulsion for Bakugo, regardless of his quirk, he declared, playing a video that deeply disturbed the teachers and Aizawa with a heavy heart. Midnight was ready to call for his expulsion with Snipe, but the bold in the room stood up. Best Jeanist has contacted me, Present Mike said as the others looked at him. He said that Bakugo does not like that Midoriya is getting all the news and even attacked a downed villain who had given up, he said as Aizawa shook his head. I am man enough to say I was wrong, and I can't believe I'm saying this, he can't be expelled, the man said as Midnight turned to him with a deep scowl. Namori, before you bite my head off, let me say what I have to say, Aizawa said as the woman nodded. Fine, but I'm telling you now that it has to be good, or so God help me. I will be the one to hand him to the police myself with all the information that we have gathered, she told him, and Aizawa nodded. He will be moved to General Ed, Aizawa started to say as he saw Midnight's scowl get worse. But he will be told that if he does anything that is deemed too far, he shall be expelled on the spot and be given over to the police as an A-rank villain, he told her, but she shook her head. No, you're being too soft on him, Midnight told him as he sighed. Quirks do not make the hero. Quirks do not make a person. The only thing that makes both is the will, and while I know Bakugo has the will to be a hero, he does not have the morality to be one, she told him as Aizawa looked down. She then looked to the others. He's on his way to becoming the next endeavor, someone so hard set on becoming number one that they do not care for the people they hurt, Midnight said as they nodded at her. Aizawa did not look up, he stayed looking at the table. While I would like to go with your option, as we do not support quirkless discrimination. It is sad to say that we cannot expel him yet, Nezu said as the woman looked over at him. At this moment we cannot even move him to General Ed as needs something fresh like the news telling us that he has severely hurt someone, and said person is close to death, then we can move him down to General Ed, and then we can count him as an average student and have him walk that thin wire. If he passes, he can become a member of society, if not, prison, he told them with a frown. Why can't we move him now or even expel him? Hound Dog asked with a growl. Nezu pulled out a small set of papers and handed them around. They all took one, and some of the staff cursed. Indeed, Noah Law is on the lookout for students who are being sent from one course to another, he told them. Or from the hero course to General Ed, Ectoplasm said as the principal nodded at him. Correct, and have to thank Toshinori for getting his legal team with UA's so what when Bakugo Dose Act, I do mean Dose, will have the full legal power at our side to take him down, Nezu said as the others nodded. And the others? Vald King asked as he held up the 8 others from Aldera. We'll speak with them personally and tell them of what they have done with Detective Tsukachi there with his quirk lie detector, and with that we can see if the students are really telling the truth, Nezu said as the others nodded at him. Yamanashi Prefecture, Koshu, Gran Torino's apartment. Izuku was in his workout clothes, standing across from a man with short black hair and dark blue eyes dressed in clothes similar to Izuku's, but he was cyan instead of gold and black. Both of them had orange training sabers as they went through the motions. Faster, the man told Izuku. Once they stopped, the teen nodded, and the two started again. Okami and Toshinori watched as the two moved. How is young Midoriya told to go faster? The hero asked. Samiken is a style that hardly uses the hands or feet, she told him, speaking as both Izuku and the man spun around and slashed at the air before they moved to a jumping slash. I see, but you said hardly uses, dose that mean they do use hands and feet, Toshinori asked her. Yes, but only a small handful, they are mainly used for when you cannot draw your sabers, Okami told him as Izuku and his trainer stopped. You're getting better at using the starting of Samiken, and soon, the shark will not bite back, the man said as Izuku bowed to him. Thank you Master Umisame, Izuku said as the man nodded. Go through the kata now, follow each step, never falter, Umisame told Izuku, who nodded as the green-haired teen completed the forms. Eri, who was nearby, was holding 2 plastic ninja swords and was copying what Izuku was doing but slowly. Inko looked at Eri with a smile, and her eyes saw a younger Izuku overlapping the girl. She is going to follow the cub's footsteps, Okami said as she smiled at the young girl and clumsily followed what Izuku was doing with a smile. Umisame narrowed his eyes as he watched Izuku before he nodded. Yame, he called out as Izuku stopped. And Eri twirled before she plopped onto the floor. You have done good. Now, the test to see if you can call on the shark, Umisame said as Izuku nodded at him. Use 2 moves, the master of the Samikan said to Izuku, who nodded. Both will be same Kiba, but the first will be the kick, and the second will be the slash, Umisame told Izuku as he stood ready for the attack. Gran Torino entered his home and saw that Izuku had moved one leg behind him. If you're going to be sending blades of energy, then follow me, he told the teen, who turned around. The elderly hero led them out of his apartment and into a building next door that had a wide open area. Now use that shit here, he told them as they nodded at him before Izuku returned to his stance with one leg far behind him as Umisame standing in front of him. And he watched as Izuku's leg glowed cyan. Same Kiba, Izuku called out as he performed an arching kick and sent out a cyan energy wave. The Samikan master stood there as the energy wave approached him, and he caught it with his bare hands, stopping it. Good work, it seems that the Shishiken has worked your muscles with your legs and arms, Umisame told Izuku before he put his hands to his side. Now for the first form of the Geki Saber Samikan, he said Izuku, who nodded. Izuku shifted his body so that one of the training sabers was pointed at the ground while the other was flat on his arm. The cyan aura around Izuku's leg moved up to around his arms before settling around his training saber. He took in a deep breath as he closed his eyes and called on the shark spirit before he spun around and turned the saber that was on his arm. Geki Saber Samikan Ichi no Kata. Same Kiba. Izuku called out as he slashed at the air as he sent out another ki wave that was sent at Unisame, who had tensed his fingers and then clamped down on the wave. Impressive, the master said as he fought with the wave, his shark spirit fighting the one Izuku had sent out. But he soon won as he snapped the ki wave. He then bowed to Izuku, who bowed back. You have much to learn before you find that you can call on the full power of the shark, but this is a good start, Umisame told Izuku after they both rose from their bows. The next day, Shizuoka Prefecture, Musutafu, UA High School, Principal's office. Nezu stood with Tsukachi as they looked at the first student they had called in. It was a girl with blonde hair and tan skin. She had light green eyes and pixie-like wings sprouting out of her back. Miss Yosei, do you know why you were called here today? Nezu asked the girl, who shook her head as Tsukachi tapped his thumb on the desk. Then it's about your middle school and how they performed quirkless discrimination. Were you or do you know anyone who attacked or hurt anyone who fits that description? He asked her. Yosei looked at her principal in shock. No sir, she said. You're lying, Tsukachi said as the girl looked at him. I'm a detective with the quirk lie detector, so do you want to try again? He asked her. Yosei looked at the man and then at Nezu before looking down. I did not hurt anyone physically. I just strung them along. It was a joke someone told me to do, she said as Nezu nodded. I see, whose idea was this? He asked her. Bakugo's, she told him as Nezu looked at Tsukachi, who nodded. So he wrote something down. I was his girlfriend, you see. Kind of. I was the school sweetheart. Everyone wanted me, well apart from one guy, Yosei told them as they looked at her. And why are you telling us? Tsukachi asked her. The one guy was quirkless, or seen as now he has a quirk, and as he wanted nothing to do with me I started to make it look like I wanted him. I would string him on, but he would not take the bait, she said as she sighed, and now he's a hero, Yosei said as Tsukachi nodded as he looked down at Nezu. Well, it seems that you have nothing to worry about this meeting, and you can return to class and tell one of the others to come in, Nezu told her. She nodded and walked out as a boy walked in. He had blocky brown hair and rocks around his hands. Mr. Ishiyama, do you know why you have been called in here today? Nezu asked the boy. I believe that it has something to do with what Midoriya-san said during that interview, Ichiyama said as Nezu nodded. Then I will say that I did indeed hurt him, but it was though a threat to my own life. I have nothing against Midoriya-san, but it was either me or him, the stone-armed boy said as Tsukachi nodded. Who threatened you if I may ask? He asked the boy. It was 3 people, the first was Katsuki Bakugo, the second is a boy who I share a class with at this time, and he is sitting outside at this moment, Tadato Shihara, and the third who went missing, Tsubasa Garaki, Ishiyama said as Nezu wrote down this information. What is going to happen to me now? Ichiyama asked. Nothing. As you passed a lie detector test, you are free to go. Could you send in Mr. Hara for me? Nezu asked, his smile all teeth. When Hara walked in, Tsukachi handcuffed him and then escorted him out of the office. Nezu turned to the shorter beside him and put the boy's student paperwork into it. When the detective returned, the next student walked in as they were shaking and sat down. It was a girl with square glasses and long black hair. Miss Hoba, do you know why you have been called here? Nezu asked her. No sir, she told him. Lie, Tsukachi said as the girl looked at him and then back at Nezu. Oh, I remember, it's because of what Midoriya said during the interview, she said as both nodded at her. I know nothing about any lie, Hoba said before the detective cut in. Alright, I know that he was bullied, but I did not partake in the bullying, she said as she looked at Tsukachi. Lie, he told her as her eyes shot wide before she sold. Fine. I bullied him, I kicked him when Bakugo had left him on the ground, and I loved it. Hoba told the two of them as they looked at her. I would add to the beating, and I got a reward for it, she said to them. And what would that be? Nezu asked them. Yamamoto-sensei beeped me silly after watching me kick Deku in the face and having him spit out teach. Too bad that beeping Ideo did not follow Bakugo's advice, Hoba said as Tsukachi narrowed his eyes. And what was that? He asked her. To jump off the roof, she told him. Tsukachi did not need to hear any more as he arrested her on the spot and walked her out. When he returned, a boy walked in after him with a mutation quirk that made him look like an iguana. Before we start, no, I did not harm anyone who was quirkless, but yes, I know people who did, the boy said, to Nezu and Tsukauchi's surprise. And they are Mr. Shippo, Nezu asked him. Katsuki Bakugo, you already got two others, and the three other students outside, Okikuminezumi, he would set Midoriya's belongings on fire. He goes by the nickname of Pack Rat, Shippo said as Nezu nodded and wrote this down. Next is Anaguma Hachimitsu. He would use his claws to cut at Midoriya. He had gashes along his back from Hachimitsu's claws, Shippo told the two, who nodded once more. And the last is Ohime-sama Mezuinu, who would, and there is no putting this lightly, she would make sure to pull out Midoriya's dick out of his pants, and thanks to seeing it once I feel inadequate, and make sure that she would make him ejaculate, he told them as Tsukauchi narrowed his eyes. So she would assault him, he asked as the teen nodded. Yep, and her father was the principal, and it was known that he would do her favors like making sure that she got high grades, as there was a teacher that caught her eye. He would tell the teacher to sleep with her so that he could keep his job, Shippo said before he gained thinking look. Hell, I even think that there was a time that she was having with him in his office, he told the two who nodded. The hero and detective looked at each other before they smiled at Shippo. Thank you, Mr. Shippo. You can return to class, he said as the teen walked out. Tsukachi walked and arrested the three sitting outside. His screams could be heard as Nezu shredded the paperwork. So out of 9, only 4 has remained with us, Nezu said as he looked at the paperwork. It could be better, Toshinori said as he walked into the office. Nezu looked up. My legal team has heard about what has happened and has already built a case to shut down Aldera and have all the staff arrested, giving them all AD rank status, All Might said as Nezu smiled darkly. Good, he said as he looked at the paperwork. The two sat silently for a while before All Might looked up. Can you call Aizawa? He asked the white-furred animal. Yamanashi Prefecture, Koshu. Izuku and Gran Torino ran through the city as they chased a man who had just robbed a store. Izuku moved across the pavement with Gran Torino in the air, hopping from lamppost to lamppost. Izuku crouched lower as people watched him give off a yellow Arua as his speed started to pick up. The man looked behind him and saw that Izuku was gaining distance from him, so he pushed his legs to go faster. But Izuku had zoned in on the man, who had enough time to drop the stuff he stole before Izuku tripped him and placed a knee on his back. Good try, Izuku said as he pulled out a pair of cuffs and put them on the man as the police car arrived. Thanks, Shishikyu, Gran Torino, the officer said as they stepped out and took the crook of their hands. Once the man was in the car and was being taken to the station. Well done kid, you've managed to get a hold on that other animal that you've been training in, but I have to say, Training in 3 animals at the same time is going to be hard on you, Torino said as Izuku nodded. Yep, but it's going to be worth it in the long run, Izuku said as he turned to Torino. So shall we get back? He asked the man, who nodded, and the two started to walk back. So what are you going to be doing with that money you have now? Gran Torino asked Izuku. Well, I was thinking about buying an apartment close to UA so that I can live close to school and have Eri with me, he told Torino, who nodded. That makes sense, but why don't you ask Nezu if there is an apartment on campus that you could buy? He said as Izuku looked at him. Why do you think there are buildings around ground beta? It's for students, he said as Izuku nodded. I see, he muttered. Yeah, and with your mother now working for UA, she's going to be moved into one of them buildings. All the teachers, apart from Toshinori, live on campus, Gran Torino told Izuku. Really? He asked as the two did not see that someone was spying on them. It was a fair-skinned girl with inward-tilting yellow eyes and thin slit-like irises, somewhat resembling those of a cat, with pale, ash blonde and was styled into 2 messy buns, with numerous wild strands sticking out. A straight fringe and 2 chin-length side bangs framed her face. She was dressed in a plain seifuku with a kansai collar. The skirt and the shirt were dark blue with double white trim, paired with a red scarf she tied loosely below. Over this, she wore an oversized beige cardigan with an extended hem, cuffs, and pockets on either side. She sported knee-length black socks and dark brown outdoor school shoes. I've found him, the one who fought Stain and who he said was a true hero to the world, the girl thought as she looked at Izuku as he talked with Gran Torino. She then blushed at him. He's so cute, she thought before her phone went off. Yes, she asked as she answered the call. She listened to the person on the other end before she squealed, all right, I'll be there in a bit, she said as she hung up before looking back at Izuku. Soon, we will meet, and I shall show you my love, she told him as she disappeared into the shadows. Shizuoka Prefecture, Musutafu, UA High School, Principal's Office. Aizawa sat in the office with Toshinori and Nezu as he went over everything that had just been told to him. Right before I start, I just to say that I knew SO meeting was going on, but this was not it, he said as the two nodded at him. Now then, you passed your quirk on to Midoriya. Saying beep you to the laws of quirks is known, Aizawa said. Yes, but the existence of this quirk must remain a secret from T-House that would try to force Midoriya to give it up, Nezu said as the man nodded. It has been passed on 8 times, making Midoriya the 9th holder of this quirk, he said as Toshinori nodded. And for some reason, you have been told by the first user that you have to tell Midoriya about the brother of the first user. Said brother has the power to steal quirks, Aizawa told the man, who nodded. Yes, All Might said as he sighed. And here I thought that I killed him when I had the chance, he said as he looked out the window. Aizawa looked at the man before he sighed, and this man in the shadows has not only been behind the Nomu but has been hunting this one for 100 years, if not 200, the teacher said as Toshinori nodded. Correct, and when he told everyone that he was called Shishikyu and that his quirk transfers energy, he was telling people while not telling them, Toshinori said as Aizawa smiled. Then he has a good brain, he said as he looked at the number 1 hero. How has his training been coming on? Aizawa asked. Good, as you said, he has a good brain, and while at first, I did not know what to do to train him, I have started to slowly get better at training him by showing him the true ropes of being a hero, All Might said as Aizawa raised a brow. And with that, he already started to branch out into other fields by making support items, he told the man. Really? Nezu asked. Toshinori nodded, pulling out a small eagle robot from his pocket. Amazing, Nezu said as he looked it over. What can it do? Aizawa asked as he looked at it. Toshinori looked at it before at the man. It can locate people and give messages, he told him as the man nodded. Young Midoriya has plans to make more of them, some with more purpose. He's already making some that look like cans, so when he works undercover it looks like he's drinking from a candid drink, Toshinori told him. Interesting, he said as he looked over. Yes, and before I left he had started to train in 3 other forms of Geki Juken, All Might said as Aizawa nodded. Good, what are they? He asked him. Hibiken, Shitoken, and Nekoken, the number 1 hero said as Aizawa nodded. I see, why them? He asked. Hibiken grants him greater flexibility. Shitoken gives him a massive speed boost, And Nekoken gives him cat-like balance and grace, All Might told the homeroom teacher. And how does that work with One for All? Nezu asked. Toshinori seemed to think for a while. One for All has seemed to make his Shishiken stronger than it would be, as well as the other Juken forms, and we've found out when he's using One for All with Shitaken he can leave a trail of fire without using Fire Ki. Toshinori told them as they looked shocked. Amazing, Nezu said as he looked at the hero. Fire Ki, Aizawa asked. When the user calls on their ki to make fire, Toshinori explained to him as the man nodded. Young Midoriya has not got enough experience with calling on elemental ki, and the first time he called on it in a while was when he decided to skip 9 forms of the Geki Saber Samiken forms, he told the man. I see, is that why he was bleeding? Nezu asked, and All Might nodded. Yes, as Samiken is a tricky one to learn, and if you do not master it, the shark will turn on you, he told his boss. I see. Has he learned how to harness the shark now so it does not turn on him? Aizawa asked Toshinori, who nodded. Good, the internship ends at the end of the week, so when he gets back we fill him in on the quirk's history, and to see if there is more to that quirk than meets the eye, the man said as All Might looked confused. What do you mean? The man asked. You told me that the first user spoke to you, so that means a part of them are still within that quirk. There will, Aizawa said as All Might nodded at him with Nezu. What if there was not only will left behind and stored within One for All but also there were quirks? He said as Nezu narrowed his eyes. So you think that is the case? He asked Eraserhead. I don't know, but I'm putting it out there as an option, Aizawa said as Toshinori seemed to be in thought. I think that Aizawa is right, All Might said as the two turned to him. I am right, but why is that? Aizawa asked with a raised brow. Young Midoriya has been able to focus on multiple tasks at once after he beat Overhaul, Toshinori said as Nezu looked shocked. How many? He asked. 9, All Might told him as the two nodded. Aizawa looked at Nezu before he looked at Toshinori. Did your master have a quirk like that? He asked. Toshinori shook his head. No, my master's quirk was called Float. It allowed her to float, he told the man. And she told me that the man before her could release smoke from his body, All Might told him. Smoke Eater, Aizawa said as he gained a light in his eye before he looked at Nezu. Can I use your computer, sir? He asked. You may, Nezu said as Aizawa walked around and started to look something up before he found something. Here it is, Smoke Eater. He was the apprentice of the pro-hero Lariat, who was said to have been trained by a hermit, Aizawa said as All Might walked around, pulled out a notepad, and started to make notes. The name of the hermit was not given, but we now know where to start, he told All Might, who nodded. Yes, and from what it sounds like, this hermit was the 4th user, Toshinori said as the others nodded. And that would mean that the 3rd was someone from just before Pro-Hero Society came to be, and the 2nd and 1st was during the height of meta abilities, he told them as they nodded. Then the first thing we need to do is make sure that we know the quirks that Midoriya could be getting when he awakens them, he said as All Might nodded. And the number is at least 7, as I did not have a quirk beforehand and neither did young Midoriya, Toshinori said as the two walked out to do their research, leaving Nezu alone in his office as he pulled up video footage. It was before the attack at the USJ, and from what it looked like, the student was part of the hero course. I finally got you, and if I rule out the girls in Midoriya, that leaves 26 students, he said as he smiled. Game on, he told himself. Izuku walked up to the school as students and others pointed at him. That's him, a boy said as he pointed at Izuku. Do you think he's single? A girl asked. Does he teach that fighting style? A man asked. He's cute, a woman said. He heard more and more about himself as he walked, smiled, and waved at them. He walked into school and met with Ida, Ochako, Tsuyu, and Todoroki. Hey, he said as they looked at him. So, how were your last few days? Ida asked the others as the 4 started to walk up to class. I was good. I can now use gunhead martial arts, Ochako said as she held her fist up. I helped capture a villain, Tsuyu told them. I fixed my bones, Izuku said. He showed them his hands and saw that the scars were fading. It's slow going, he told them. And I have stopped walking into the male stalls, Todoroki said as the girls looked at her. It was slow going, she explained. They reached their class and found no one was there, So they moved to the back and started talking. So, Midoriya, I have heard that you are going to be getting a merchandise line soon, Ida said as Izuku nodded at him. Yay, and thanks the gods that Nezu found out about it first, and he's going to come to me sometime this week and have me speak to a management student, so that they can work with me when I leave school, Izuku told them as they nodded at him. It makes sense. Are they going to do the same for a support student? Todoroki asked as Izuku nodded. I see. Do you want any of us with you when you pick the students? She asked him. Yeah, if that's all right with you guys, he asked them as they nodded. Ojiro then walked in and saw Izuku. Hey, Midoriya, he called out as Izuku looked over. Yeah, Izuku asked. Do you think we can spar sometime? I want to see firsthand your fighting style, he said with a smile, and Izuku nodded. Other students started to walk in as the 5 friends moved to their seats, and they all sat down. Bakugo smoldered in his seat as he heard Izuku congratulate him on being the first to become a hero. Oh, good, you're all here, Aizawa said as he walked in. He looked at Bakugo before moving his eyes to Izuku. And Midoriya, well done on becoming the youngest hero ever, and while you're here, I have hopes that you go far, he told the teen, who bowed his head. I hope so too, sensei, he said as he looked at the man. Good, now as you are all wondering, Mineta is no longer a student of Class 1A as he has been assaulting women when on his work studies, and to replace him, is Hitoshi Shinso, Aizawa said as Izuku's opponent at the sports festival walked in and sat behind Izuku as the green-haired teen smiled at him. Now, then, that we are all back, I want to share a quick thing that you all have learned from the heroes that you picked to intern with, the homeroom teacher told them as Aoyama was the first to stand up. I have learned that I can be more sparkly with my quirk and how to use my laser better, Aoyama said with a smile. Good, we will be expanding on that, Aizawa said as he pointed at Mina. I've gotten better at making acid that does not burn skin, she told him, and Aizawa looked impressed by her. That is good, and with it, you might not face many charges if you can do it without thinking, he told her as she smiled. Asui, Aizawa said as Suyu stood up. I have learned to use my quirk better, and I'm going to be looking for somatic that can help me kick better, she told him. I see, and thankfully, you have 3 people in this room who can help you out. Ida, Midoriya, and Ojiro. So if you need to, ask them, Aizawa told her as he moved to Ida. Ida, he asked him. After the incident, I have been taking to Hound Dog so that I can move past my brother's injury, he told his teacher, and Aizawa nodded. And it's a good thing you did that. A hero will always need somewhere to go so they do not suffer from PTSD, the homeroom teacher told him before he moved Okacho. I've managed to learn how to use gunhead martial arts, Ochako told her teacher, who nodded pleasantly. I've started to create a fighting style, Ojiro said as Aizawa nodded, pleased. I'm going to be honest and say that I did not learn much as the hero that I studied under did mainly office work, Kaminari told the man. I see. That's okay as things happen, Kirishima, Aizawa said, looking over at the boy. I learned how the public and heroes work together, he said as Aizawa nodded. Good, you all will need that in the future. If you are seen as close to a villain, your rank will be lower, like mine, but I want mine to be low, he told them as they all nodded. Koda, Aizawa looked over to the shy boy. He sighed to the man, I see, that is a good idea. Go to places that have animals and talk with them so that you can get a better handle on your quirk, he told his student. This continued as each student spoke about what they learned from their internship. All right now, then. I'll hand you off to All Might. See you all later, Aizawa said before he put on his sleeping bag, collapsed to the floor, and caterpillared out of the room. So Shinso, how was training with Aizawa-sensei? Izuku asked as he turned to the purple-haired teen. Tiring, but rewarding, he told Izuku, who nodded at him. 2 hours later, Ground Gamma. I am here. Are you all ready to return and start our lesson? All Might said as everyone was in their costumes. Shinso wore a short-sleeved black shirt, fishnet-like undershirt, 4 mini-speaker-like buttons and a belt around the waist, gray shoulder pads, purple elbow pads, fishnet arm sleeves, and knuckle-guard gloves, which are fingerless only on the index and thumb. His pants are also black, and his white boots have purple tips and soles, purple straps around the thighs and calves, and a mini-speaker-like device on the side. Today is Hero Basic Training, and listen carefully to what is in store. Today's lesson is that we will be conducting a race, and I want you all to take everything you have learned from your internship and apply it to this RESUCE training, the number one hero told them as Ida raised his hand. Sir, then should we not be at the USJ instead? He asked. Good question, but the USJ's rescue training is all about disasters. As I said earlier, this is a race, so prepare as you step into Field Gamma, All Might told them as a screen showed the training zone. This field is a factory with the pipes making a labyrinth, and you will need luck finding your way around. You will compete in group of 5, and while each person starts from a different location on the outside of the family, I shall release a rescue signal, and you must do everything you can to get to me as fast as you can, and the one that finds me first wins, he told them before he pointed at Bakugo. What? He screamed at the teacher. Property damage must be kept at a minimum, he told the teen, whose eye twitched. Now then, the first 5 are, All Might said as he pressed a button, and names started shattering around before they were picked. Izuku Midia, Mashirao Ojiro, Tenya Ida, Mina Ishido, Honta Siro. All right, you 5 go find a starting point. Everyone else follows me, All Might said as the starting 5 went in. After 5 minutes, All Might let the others in. Once they all reached a platform, a screen showed the others. Who do you think is going to win? Kaminari asked as he looked at the screen and saw that the others were stretching. I don't know who will win, but I think that Midoriya is at a disadvantage with how his quirk is, even with his fight in MG style, Momo said as she watched Izuku on all fours atop a water tower with his eyes closed. My money's on Ojiro, Kaminari said. I bet Siro, Kirishima said as Bakugo scoffed. Deku's coming dead last, he said as others nodded. I think that Ida could get it, Ochako said to the others. All Might lifted a button, and when he pressed it, everyone saw that Siro was making his way. It makes sense that if you can get above everything, it would be easy, Kirishima said with a smile. And so Siro has the advantage, Shoji said as the others nodded. Before, a green blur zoomed past Siro on the screen as the hover to bot showed Izuku running on a pipe. What? Everyone asked, shocked, but All Might had a hidden smile as he watched. With Izuku moved across the pipes, channeling 2 animals as he ran while using one for all. If I keep at 5% with Yuga Neko and Shun Soka, I should be able to do this, Izuku thought as he landed on a railing and ran across it, leaving a trail of cyan lightning along with cherry blossom pink and yellow aura behind him. How's he doing that? Mina asked as Izuku moved past her. She blinked and said that she had seen a cheetah run past her. And how are his bones not broken? Siro asked as he landed. He saw that Izuku ran up a wall on all fours before zooming off. With All Might, everyone looked shocked as Izuku ran. Wow, Okaok said as the screen showed that Izuku was zoning on them. No one had anything to say. They were all shocked by how Izuku moved across the training field. Then they watched something amazing. When Izuku's food landed on a pipe, the pink aura vanished, and he was covered in the aura. And then he little turned onto what looked like a light as he burst forward, around the pipes around him, appeared on the platform, and walked over to All Might. The others started to arrive slowly. They looked at Izuku in shock as he was given a sash to put on. Well done, hero, All Might said as he sent the next 5. How did you do that? Ida asked Izuku, who smiled at him. I used 2 animals at the same time. I used Shun Soka from the Chitakan forms and Yuga Neko from the Nekokan forms, before using Shunpo from Chitakan to get up here quickly, Izuku told him as Ida looked amazed and shocked. Amazing, Ida said as the others congratulated Izuku, but one person did not as he glared at Izuku. What bullshit is this? That beeping nerd pulled that out of his beeping ass. How the flying beep did he do that shit? Bakugo glared at Izuku so hard that he was hoping that he would unlock a new part of his Kurik. Alright. Then the next 5, to your possessions, All Might said as he walked over to Izuku. Meet me in the conference room after class. I have something to tell you, he told his successor, who nodded. 3 hours later, conference room. Izuku sat on a sofa across from All Might. Thank you for coming today, and I have to tell you that I have informed Aizawa about One for All, he told Izuku, who nodded. That makes sense, All Might, he said as the door opened, and Aizawa and Nezu walked into the room, with Aizawa carrying a stack of paperwork. Now that you are here, it's time to learn the origin of the quirk you now hold. It came from another quirk. A quirk that is possibly the oldest registered quirk in human history, but it is seen as nothing more than a myth, All Might told Izuku, who looked confused. What quirk is that? He asked the man. It was called All for One. It allowed the user to take quirks from others, allowing the user to keep the quirk or give the quirk to someone else, All Might said as Izuku nodded. This was in the day where quirks were called meta abilities, you see, and in that time was a lot of upheaval and danger for those with powers and T-hows without, Nezu told Izuku, who nodded. I read about this. It was said that it was only fixed around 100 years ago, and we are still on the back on of dealing with it, Izuku said as the others nodded at him. You are correct, but when those with powers became too much, society collapsed and turned the world into what was known as the Great Dark Age, Aizawa told Izuku, who looked at him. It was not a good time for people. People would kill anyone for any reason, families were wiped out, crime was at an all-time high worldwide, and no one was safe, he told his student. And one man drew a lot of people to his side. I do not know his real name, but he went by the name of his power, All for One. He would do favors for people in taking their quirks away and in exchange follow him, and vice versa, and within a blink of an eye, he ruled Japan, and he even spread his influence across the sea, All Might told the teen. But Izuku narrowed his eyes before they shot wide. Don't tell me, he asked as the number one hero nodded. Yes, All for One gave people quirks, but their bodies could not handle them, and they became what would later be known as the Nomu, like the ones that you and I fought, All Might told Izuku, who nodded at him. But other times, the quirks would either evolve or merge with an existing quirk, he said Izuku, who was putting the pieces into place. The man had a quirkless younger brother, but the brother wanted justice as opposed to evil, and he always fought his older brother, but the younger was too sickly, so the older brother gave his younger one a quirk that would stockpile energy within the body. He told Izuku, who looked shocked, but the brother did not know it, but he did indeed have a quirk, one that can pass on quirks, and thus One for All was created, All Might told Izuku, who did not know what to say. Thank you for telling me this, but why are you? Izuku asked him. I can answer that, Aizawa said as the teen turned to him, after doing some research on him, has taken a quirk that was called Time Stop. It belonged to someone who was a prominent figure during the Great Dark Age. She was someone who said that they should name their abilities so that it could help bridge a gap between them, and then she was killed, found dead in her home, and for 200 years one hand has been living, the same man that All Might fought, he told his student, who looked shocked. When I got my injury all those years ago, it was because of him. I fought, and I had thought at the time I killed him, but it seems I was wrong, and it has been said that everything that has happened this year can be traced back to him, All Might told Izuku, who nodded. From everything that we have gathered and been told by Toshinori and his master before him, One for All has a mission to give its users with each passing of the quirk, Nezu said as Izuku looked at him. The mission stopped All for One, and Toshinori thought that he did by crushing the skill of All for One, he said before the white-furred animal sighed. So I'm going to have to face him, Izuku asked them as the three nodded. But not alone, Aizawa said as Izuku looked at him. You do not have what All Might had, a circle of trust, so you have to start by gaining one of them first. With that said, I will be helping you as a circle member, the teacher told Izuku. Then, he told Izuku that he could leave. One of the three left in the room said nothing as they looked at the door. How goes the search for the mole? Aizawa asked Nezu. I've narrowed it down to 14 students, and all of them are first years, he said as the two looked at him. 7 from each class, 1A and 1B, he told them as they narrowed their eyes. Who is on the suspect list? All Might asked as Nezu gave both men a list of names. I think I can rule out one name right now, Aizawa said as Nezu looked up at him. Todoroki, I think. No, I know that she has nothing to do with the attempt, and I've looked at the cafeteria footage. We can rule out these 7, he said as he pulled out a pen, crossed out the names, and handed it back to Nezu, who nodded at them. I agree. Keep an eye on these 7. I'll inform Vlad and make sure that they are under watch, Toshinori said as he walked out, Aizawa following him not far behind. Now then, what is your next move, Mole? The cage is closing in, and we are getting closer to you. You need only make one mistake, and with that one, we will snap the trap, Nezu said as he soon walked out. The next day, Class 1A classroom. When Aizawa approached him, Izuku sat during the free period, working on a blueprint. Midoriya, here is the list of management students and some support students. You have until the end of the month to choose, he told Izuku as he handed over 2 stacks of paperwork. Ida, Ochako, Tsuyu and Todoroki walked over and started to help as Izuku started to hand papers over to them. He seems to be thinking like a pro already, and it looks like he's leading sidekicks, Aizawa thought as he walked away as Shinso looked on amazed. Here's one, Harukara Senyo. Like this, she's a first year. She made a campaign for the energy drink for Funkman, Ochako said as she looked at the paper before her face became deadpan. Never mind. I don't think she's a good pick, she told them. Why's that? Ida asked as he looked over at another management student. She messes with mushrooms, and she sometimes forgets what mushrooms are, Ochako told him as the 4 shook their heads. Raiji Akaba, from a good family, has a younger brother, Ida called out, feeling for the student before he put the paper down. Never mind, he said as the others nodded and moved on. Seto Seryu, top of his class, made a formula that Mount Lady, a third-year student, uses. Tsuyu read out before she shook her head. He wants to be paid thousands a week, she said as the others nodded. I think I have the one, Todoroki said as he handed the paper to Izuku, who looked it over before nodding. I think she can be a good fit, Izuku said as he showed the others, and they nodded. And she's a first year, Ochako said as she looked at the paper. She is also the one that made the captain that helped Mirko get her own building last month, Ida said as he looked at him before they nodded at him. Now you have to do the support student, Shinso said from where he sat as Izuku looked at him. And the best course of action is having them compete against each other, he told him as Izuku nodded. That's fair, Todoroki said as she looked at the students before they all got up. Shinso followed them as they made their way to the support classroom, where Aizawa picked up the information on the student. I see, so you're going for her. I heard good things about her, he muttered as he left the classroom and went to the management classroom. Once he reached it, he knocked on the door, and a voice called, "Come in." Aizawa walked in. The teacher was a tall, lean man with light skin and vibrant blue eyes. He had messy gray hair and wore a black double-beeped suit, red shirt, and white tie. On his back were a pair of dragon-like wings, and his hands and feet were also dragon-like, as was the dragon-like creature behind him. Hey Aizawa, what can I do for you? The man asked. Hey, go. Can I speak with Kaya Izumi? He said as a blonde girl in the class looked shocked. Sure, but can I ask why? Go asked him. Oh, she's the one that was picked to help my student when he becomes a full-time hero, in other words, Aizawa said as the girl stood up. She was a somewhat tall girl, around the same height as Momo, with short blonde hair, an ahoge, tan skin, and blue eyes. She wore her white shirt tied up into a knot around her cleavage and a short version of the school skirt. I get to start my career, she said as Aizawa nodded at her. Yes, Midoriya is on his way to the support classroom, and I have a feeling that your homeroom teacher will tell you what is going to happen now, but I just came to let you know to go to the conference room tomorrow so that you can meet with your first client, he said as he walked out, and her classmates started to congratulate her. Alright then, with that said, today's lesson then is going to be on what your duty is going to be from now on, Go said once Aizawa walked out. Support classroom. Izuku and his friends stood across from Powerloader, who nodded along with him and had a hidden smile. I see that is a good idea for them, he said as he looked at the students who looked at them with the student who helped Izuku, and Ochako at the sports festival tinkering away. Alright. Everyone, listen up, Powerloader called out as all the students looked at him with the girls still tinkering. May, he called out as the girls stopped and looked. Now that I have everyone's attention, I have a task for each of you, he said as they nodded at him. Shishiku here is looking for someone to join him as his primary support item maker. That means everything he will use, and so he's here to pick one of you to be that person, Powerloader said as hungry eyes turned to Izuku, who hands to channel the lion to stop him from flinching. Now, each of you will have one try, and one only. Now, then, here are the rules, he said as he let Izuku step up. Each of you has to pick an animal to revolve your creation around, and no two people going for the same animal, Izuku said as people pulled out notebooks and pads to put down the rules. If you have any questions about the animales that I can use for or using, you can ask me, or go across the road to the new dojo that is being built and ask the sensei there, he told them. When he said nothing else, Powerloader walked up. Each of you must submit the animal that your work is going to be around to me by the end of the day, and now that all support items, even if not picked, will be gifted to Shishiku, he told them as they nodded. And for those who don't pass, I'll talk with Power Loader and pay each of you for the time it took for the items, he said, and the man nodded. They looked at each other before they nodded at him. To be continued. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.